What's up guys, I'm Chris with Drift HQ. Today I'm going to show you how to install the Mild Mantis kit on a 370Z. So once you get your vehicle in the air, secured on jack stands or on a lift, first thing I'm going to do is take the outer tie rod off by removing the cotter pin and taking off this 19mm nut. This car is a little rusty. Goes. I got this pickle fork. You can smack the knuckle a whole bunch, but because these knuckles are aluminum, try to be careful with it. And since we don't really care about our outer tie rod boot, I can just get that right in there. Comes out. And that lets us get that more out of our way. Now to give us some more room to work, to remove this lower control arm, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and take my inner tie rod off while I have the rack pinned over this way. So you're going to cut this little boot retainer here and then break that loose. That looks healthy. So while this is not the right tool, I don't have the right size wrench for this, so I am just using a pipe wrench, which works out great. Now we're going to start removing our lower control arm. So the first thing I do, just while there's still some tension on it with the shock, is take that same cotter pin we took out of our outer tie rod. We're going to take that one out of the lower control arm here where the ball joint is. That's rusty, but we got it. Now we can take our lower ball joint nut off. It's going to be a 22mm. That boy's tight. There she goes. So we have a 19mm here that passes through the sway bar end link through the lower shock bolt, and then there's three 14mm bolts we got to take out. So now if you hold your knuckle out of the way and grab a pry bar, you can actually free the shock from your sway bar link. We'll take our pry bar again. Let's go ahead and work that on out. Now we have the rear mount for our lower control arm, which is a 17mm bolt on the bottom with a nut on the back. I use a little stubby wrench because this back one's a little harder to get to. Now you're going to hold on to your lower control arm because that is the last thing holding it in place. You can now have the back free and slip the front out of the cross member if you're lucky. Well, this car had already replaced the sway bar end links, so they are pretty tight, so it's not really giving you enough movement. So if you're struggling with it, you can just use a 17 wrench and a 17 socket and just take out the sway bar end link on the lower here. You can try anyways. There we go. Don't get hit with the control arm. There you go. Stock arm assembly. So now that the whole lower control assembly is removed, we can put our angle adapter from FDF on there. So easiest way to do it, just pass it through the existing assembly and drop your shit on the floor. Yeah, don't drop that washer. And we just start that by hand for now, so we get everything else in place, because our lower ball joint for the new control arm will also bolt like that. So this is going to be your caster adjustment adapter. This piece here will bolt to your cross member. I find it's easier to put it onto the control arm first and then bolt it down when it's in the car, because then we can put this in as one whole assembly, because getting this fitted into here while it's inside the car is not that easy. Those are two 19s. You're gonna wanna tighten those up before you put it in. It's a lot easier than it is inside the car. I'm just backing this out about 4 or 5 turns, because that's usually just about where we are. It all depends on what your alignment specs are and everything. So you're gonna take your OEM 19mm lower control arm bolt, and we're gonna put it right back through where it was before. So if you have a friend or a camera guy, it helps to pull the knuckle out of your way while you hold this up, take some of the tension off that lower control arm. Now, the kit came with hardware provided. That's gonna line up to this rear bolt hole that passes through the cross member, right into where you want it to go. This one apparently does not line up. All right, so now we have the lower control arm center bolt in place. We're gonna lift this up and put our shock bolt through, as well as our lower ball joint, to keep the tension and keep our control arm flat and make it easier to align our back 2 bolts. Yeah, use your friend or a camera guy to get this thing where you want it. Control arms in place. So now using your buddy and or cameraman, you're gonna push your knuckle up onto your lower control arm, and then you can secure that lower ball joint nut. You're gonna reuse your OEM one. So this way, this way, this way.
Just guide me.
Yep, now up. Your hand's in the way. A little bit more, there we go. She's in. Look at that. Now figure out that if you put that up first, it is easier to get this bolt to line up. Look at that, I don't even gotta fight it. Joel doesn't have to start sweating. Doing great. Now this is where our caster adjustment's gonna be from. This guy, you can see that move wheel forward and back. So that's all loose right now. So obviously that'll get set in place once you get your alignment spec'd out. I do not have the correct wrench for this, but it's about a 22 on the top and bottom. So you're gonna snug down that knuckle adapter. Easiest way to do this, just pop this out. That'll let you take out the link for your outer tie rod. Don't lose your eyelets. Now we can assemble our whole tie rod tube assembly to where our inner tie rod is going to bolt up. Now this is our inner tie rod adapter. You're going to space that forward to get our offset closer to our engine cross member and closer to the ball joint. So what I do is I put a little thread locker on these because they do have a tendency to come loose. It's a 14mm Allen key. All right, now you can take your OEM inner tie rod, spin your jam nut all the way down. Then thread it into your new extended tie rod tube. One side will be right hand thread, the other side will be left hand thread, so be careful with that not to cross thread it. I like to start with these as far in as you can possibly get them, so that way your adjustment stays the same through both sides. OEM inner, we're going to put a little bit of thread locker on that as well, put it back in. Now I'm going to take my pipe wrench and snug this back down, same way I got it loose before. Putting your eyelets back in place like they were before.
There we go now.
All right. So now you have your tie rod assembly in place. You can swing your knuckle back into where it was before. It's going to take a little bit of massaging to get the alignment just right because these hind joints are pretty tight. Maybe a little more pitch this way. There she is. You can put that bolt that we took out earlier, 14mm, we'll thread right in. So these things come with these awesome lockout plates that actually go right over the head of your outer tie rod bolt, and then they give you a bolt and nut that passes through the control arm. So you just gotta make sure that your orientation, you can flip it both directions until you find one that'll line up for you. So those you'll tighten up with a 3/16 Allen key and a 11mm wrench. And that'll prevent this bolt right here from from ever being able to back out while you're driving, which is good. Some kind of way this sway bar end link picks up to somewhere on here, which doesn't exist anymore. So I guess we'll solve that problem later. So one of the things about this kit that you need to know is the sway bar end link you can use with the stock lower shock bolt. The only issue is unless you run a very low offset wheel, then your tire will likely be hitting your sway bar. So option B is to just run it with the provided bolt and the lower control arm, and then you remove these 14 millimeter nuts on the bottom here and just take your sway bar off. This setup, we're gonna try and make the front sway bar work, but if you have wheels that are gonna start hitting and stuff like that, it is possible to remove it. Just depends on how you like your car setup. Now that that's done, you have two 14 millimeter bolts here that you need to tighten, as well as you want to finish tightening your lower shock bolt. Now your inner tie rod assembly is tight, and don't forget to tighten that lower control arm as well. And that pretty much does it. Now everything else just needs to be adjusted by an alignment shop. You can hit up FDF and get your recommended alignment specifications depending on what you're doing with the car.